Okay, so we're recording now, and hopefully my face doesn't actually show up. I picked the other version. Um, I guess you guys will have to look at me there. Let me see if I can minimize that. There. All right. So, like I said, phase three, looking at prior year trends and important ratios, and we're going to build a forecast on a budget. Um, so let's take a look at what I actually want you to do. Um, what I was saying before, I do think next Wednesday, I mean, it gives you a week if I get a lot of people's like, hey, we need more time or whatever, we can talk about it, adding days and stuff. But for now, we'll do a week. Um, phase three, it looks like a lot of work. A lot of it's copying and pasting. You did most of the stuff with phase two. So what's the idea? The idea is that now that we have several years worth of data, what can we do with it? Like, how can we use it? Um, and so my idea is to you could we're building a forecast. You could almost call it a budget. I don't want to call it a budget simply because we don't have enough information to really build a true budget. Like, we spent all that time in the lecture talking about all the things that you need and how time consuming it can be, versus we're just going to use some mathematical analysis. So from a technical perspective, it's more of a forecast, but it really could go either way. So I'll show you. I'm just going to pull up one of the files. Once again, I've taken the files, the templates I gave you guys to start with. I've updated them, made them all the same. What they don't have in them is they don't have the data that you've just collected. So you've got to do one of a couple different things. Let me pull one up. What's the first one? Let's do Kimberly Clark. All right. So what you see is all this is obviously still blank. I've got phase three here at the bottom. This is all still blank. You can do one of a couple things. You can open up your phase two file and you can copy and paste the phase three tab over into it and then drop in your numbers. The other thing that you could do would be to try and take what you've already got filled out from phase two, and you could try and copy and paste like these other sections that I've added. I don't recommend that one because there's more likely that spacing gets off or something. I think it would be easier to just simply open up, your other phase and just copy and paste. Don't copy again. Please don't copy over the formulas, but just copy and paste and fill in the white spaces. I think that's the easiest way to accomplish a task. And there's not that much, it's just those three pieces. Okay, let's flip back over. So that's what I'm saying here. You have two options. Either carry the data over and copy and paste information for the prior year's data, or however you want to do it. I would recommend keeping it in the same workbook, so you have like a phase two tab, a phase three tab, and then however you want to put it in. So now that you have a formatted worksheet and you have all the extra stuff where I've added things to the new template file. Here's what we have. Columns I through M contain common size vertical analysis of the historical data. I put here, I've added the initial formulas in the cash and cash equivalents line of the balance sheet and net sales revenue line on the income statement. You'll need to copy and paste the formulas to the remaining blank cells. The sum should still add to the correct balance. So this is what I said. There's a lot of copy and pasting. That's why, even though there's a bunch of stuff to fill in, it's not all that hard. So if we look like right here, say if I'm just going to type in numbers, 12, 13, 15, I keep going the wrong direction, 17, 18. All right. As I fill in numbers, you can see my first row of formulas over here starts to fill in. Now, a common size vertical analysis, I didn't talk about those in the slides. What a common size analysis does is it divides every single number on your balance sheet by total assets right here. So I'm dividing that by that. The reason it's at 100% right now is because I've only got one number. But if I come over here and, I start adding something else, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8. Now, and then I copy my formulas down one row, you can see that, it's splitting those up on the individual lines. But again, when we get to total assets, it's still 100. Now, why is this useful? What would we use the common size analysis for? What it does is it helps big percent changes jump out at you from year to year, or it can help, um, not necessarily that account, but say you have a particular item that's been pretty steady. It's always been like 20% of total assets or whatever, and then all of a sudden it falls to 10 or jumps to 30. Well, what happened? Did that line change, or did something else change to make it, go up or down or whatever? So it's just a good way for things to pop out at you. And I have opened this file. This was Cigna that I had done. So this has actual results from these years, but I'll blow it up. Um, Common size on total assets, but we can look through them. Like right here. The I think that's probably other. Prepaids and other assets. Again, just looking row by row. Obviously you have a bunch of stuff that's usually less than 1%, or no, it goes up and down. 1% 7, 1% 7, 1% 4. Like, so I don't necessarily know the answer, but if I were the person like actually doing this, that might make me go and dig into the details further and be like, why are we seeing this? This up and down, this up and down, or like up here for cash and cash equivalents. You had a big spike in 2020 where it was worth um, a lot more. Um, so why? Uh, let's see. Same thing you can do. You can do that down here. This is what is that? Other assets. So down here in other assets, you can see that we had other assets totaling 50%, and all of a sudden that dropped drastically down to 20. And what happened? Well, a lot of it, they started splitting out uh, their intangible assets. Like, I know that because I did this a couple years ago with the class. But like, you could look and see like, okay, we have these big changes. What drove them? And it's, well, they reclassified something because of an accounting change. So that's the kind of stuff that you can learn from common size vertical analysis. So basically, you'll just need to copy and paste the formulas all the way down through. I could have done that, but it gives you guys something to do. So we're going to do that first, and then columns O through T. Oh, real quickly, I do not have a common size analysis for the cash flows. Oftentimes, common size analyses for cash flows don't work. Like, they don't really give us good information. Generally, when you see them done, they're done with for operating cash flows. But because cash is so different, it's just a lot of times the information it gives you is useless. Like, it's hard to infer anything from changes because it could be timing issues, it could be all kinds of stuff. It could also be like when you look at if you're using operating cash flows and you look at like investments. Well, again, you buy something from an income statement side, you're depreciating it, but on the cash flow, if you paid for it all, then you've got this big outflow, and so you can have these big fluctuations up and down that just don't make a whole lot of sense. So no common size for cash flows. All right. So then columns O through T. Column O has a compound annual growth rate. We'll look at that in a second. It tells us what the average growth rate would have been, and then columns P through S. Can't use T because you have to have a prior number. Calculates the annual changes from years, current year minus prior year. Allows us again to see patterns or trends um, in a dollars or in a ratio versus like as a percent of total assets. It lets us look at the individual line items changes. So, like in this example, since I've got 2 years, let me copy and paste this down a row. So, like in this example, you can see again with me making up numbers that the number itself jumped, you know, eight from 8% to 15. It jumped 15% of the prior year balance. Now, again, remember, we're talking about 12 to 13, so it's only $1 million if this, if it's in millions. But whenever you do a million into 12, it's 15%, or it's 8%, and then yeah, it's 8%, and then jumping from 13 to 15 is 15%, like that. So it lets you look and see how much the individual lines are changing year on year. And then this 5-year CAGR rate, it's a little formula where we're using the rate formula. What it's saying is if we started over here with $12 and we know in our most recent year we got to 18, if that had been a smooth growth, what would that rate have been versus the fluctuating sort of up and up and up? If it was to grow the exact same amount every year, what would we have had to do to get to 18? And excuse me, the answer is 8%. And you could check that very easily by like 12, 1.08, and then equals that times that, and take the prior year, that stays the same. And after, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So after 5 years, like it's the $18. Like basically it's saying if you use 8%, it would get you to the 18. Versus the little bits of ups and downs. Now, obviously, because I made the numbers up and I may have small numbers, it's just going up, 1 million per year or whatever. When you're using real data, obviously, it's not going to look it's still going to be smooth, but it might jump, it might go 13, 15, 17, 19, 21, whatever it happens to be. But that's basically that's what the compound annual growth rate, you're figuring out what it would have been. So that's what this 5-year rate is. And again, it's just giving you an idea of what that smooth change would have been. So, and again, those things can all be copied down. I may not have changed the formatting on some of these. You might want to make them percents. Apologies if I did. I tried to catch everything, but since I didn't have it all filled in, I can tell right there it doesn't have the right formatting on it. So anyway, so you'll want to copy and paste those down. And then finally in rows 114 through 140, there's a series of liquidity and operating ratios for you to complete. I put here in column H, I spelled out what the ratios are. Then for operating turnovers and year-end position ratios, look at the comments I've made for the cells in column H. They tell you what the underlying accounts are. What you're going to do is you're going to link it. You can link it up above to the financial statements. So what does all that mean? These are liquidity and operating cycle analysis ratios as determined by the certified financial analyst, like the group or whatever that sort of runs them. Like these are ratios that they use. But they're also relevant for what we're trying to do because they're related to operations and the kind of stuff that we're looking at. What I did is I I came over here, like I said, and I wrote very specifically what each thing is. And so you really only have to do, 1 year for each, then you can copy and paste it. So like this one is current assets minus current liabilities. So you could scroll up, find your current assets number and subtract your current liabilities number. And now you have it and you can copy and paste it all the way across. Easy enough. Um, current oh, current assets less excluding cash and security. So basically, you would go up, put in parentheses that the current asset number, subtract out cash and any securities that may be. I just use that term, but basically anything is cash. And then subtract from that current liabilities excluding debt. And that's called the net operating working capital. So what you're doing is you're excluding stuff that isn't tied directly to operations. Other ratio, and you should be familiar with some of these just from other classes you've had. But we want to do the current ratio, quick ratio, the asset test. And here again, I've spelled it out: current assets minus inventory over current liabilities, etc. Then these three turnover: receivables, inventory, and payables. This is what the formula, or this is what it says, how you would calculate it: total revenue. So your revenue line from the income statement divided by averages, but average accounts receivable. Um, what what do I mean by average accounts receivable? That's where I said I put comments in for you. If you hold it over, it says average AR is current year AR plus prior year AR divided by 2. That's why you got to have the prior year number. So it means that probably the 2019 you can't calculate because you don't have 2018 data. That's fine. You don't have to email me and ask why. Just leave it blank. Inventory is going to be the same thing. You're going to use cost of goods sold instead of sales. And then the inventory purchases is payables. Think about that. That's the like sort of formal name for the ratios. Like I took these off of an actual like thing that's published on the internet. So it's average accounts payable. So current year plus prior year divided by 2. These are operating days. So we've got turnovers. Basically, what does that mean? It's just divided the number of days in the year by whatever the turnover is up above. So, it's very common to use 360 days just because it's a round number. It still gives you a fraction, or a decimal, but that's just common. So literally it would be like equals 360. You can use 365 if it bothers you, divided by the receivables. Like that's literally it. And copy and paste it over. Same thing for inventory. This is just the addition of the two above. So that plus that. Again, I tried to label everything so it was clear. Days to pay is the payables, the 360 divided by that. And then the average day, so this cash to cash cycle, what that basically means is you started with cash, you bought inventory, you produced things, you sold them, you collected the accounts receivable, and then you paid off the people that you bought the initial inventory from. So that's the cash to cash cycle. It's that whole process. And so to figure out how long it takes you, you basically add the days to collect, so the accounts receivable period, and the days to move, that's the inventory period, add them together, take out how long it takes you to pay for it, and it gives you that cycle. And then this last one is, these are year-end positions. So this is stuff like where we're mixing income statement and balance sheet. And so these ratios can sometimes, help give us an idea for at the end of the year, sort of what's sitting out there. So sales and receivables, days supply of inventory and receivables, and purchases and payables. Once again, they're a little not super complicated, but like ending receivables, that makes sense. That's just your AR from up above. So what is average daily sales? it's going to be total sales over 360. Not super hard. Cost of sales over 360. The only one that has a little bit more. No, why does it not there? I guess you got to click on it to show the whole comment. To do the payables, you have to calculate what the incremental purchases for the year is. And if you think way back to accounting 201, we actually did this a little bit. You take ending inventory, you add cost of goods sold, and you subtract beginning inventory. That gives you the purchases for the year. All those numbers are up above. You just link it based on the formula. That will give you the purchases, and then you divide that by 360. And, basically that tells us at the end of the year for each one of those, if that, like say the receivables number is, 5 or whatever, then basically it tells us that 5 days of our sales haven't been collected at the end of the year. And where that can be beneficial is if we can see trends from year to year, like say if that number is getting bigger or getting smaller. If that number is getting bigger, that can be a bad thing because it's taking us longer to collect our revenue. It's taking us longer to collect our accounts receivable after we sell them. Versus if it's going down, then we're collecting faster. Same thing for inventory. How quickly are we, selling our inventory out? If we've got 10 days of inventory at the end of the year versus 3 days of inventory, that's a lot of stuff just sitting there, sort of unused, unfulfilled, whatever. And payables, same thing. Some would argue that you would want the payables number to go up because it just means that you're not you're holding on to the cash longer, which sometimes can be a strategy, especially if you have people that aren't offering you like discounts and stuff for paying early. Then some companies will try and hold on to their cash a little bit longer, so they may actually want to see the payable, like that number clicking up. So anyway, so those are our ratios. Not, again, stuff that you've probably seen, and I don't like this isn't stuff. Again, there's no quizzes, there's no tests. You guys don't have to memorize this stuff. I'm giving you information, and these are things that are relevant for making a determination of what we would like to see in the next year. So to those ends, after you've copy and pasted everything and linked your little formulas, and again, split it up amongst your team, want to do all of it. So, okay, now that we've done all the busy work and filled out the schedules, do the quote fun part where we get to make everything up, which is what our forecasting is. So different ways to do it. We're going to use a couple different ways that we talked about. We're going to mix a couple different quantitative ways. We don't have a qualitative way really to do much with this. So I've laid out here how I want you to do it. For the balance sheet and income statement, basically, you've got these common size factors over here of what percentage they are of total assets. I'm going to give it says this in the write up. I'm going to give you some discretion if you want to use like an average of all 5 years, if you want to use the most recent year or whatever. And basically, you would take each of those percentages and you would multiply it by the current year. So I would come like here, I would take 40%, and I would multiply it by total assets, which is down here. That's going to do a circular reference. I didn't even think about that because that number can't, I'll have to, before I load that, I'll have to fix that. It can't be length. So where does that leave us? Well, we can do that for every number for the balance sheet and the income statement. The income statement ties to the total sales number up here. So we can do it for everything except for total sales and total assets, because again, then you'd have circular references. So how do we make up those two balances? Well, I gave you an option here. Let's see. But wait. How do we determine the total assets and the net sales? Well, it's the same way we're going to do the cash flows because remember, we didn't do common size for the cash flows. So we don't have common size values for it. So there's a couple different ways. You can take that 5-year CAGR amount and simply multiply it by whatever the most recent year was. So if our rate was 1.08, then you could take your total assets down here and do equals the prior year times, and you could either do 1.0 or you could do 1 plus um, whatever the rate. Once it's all filled out, that would be a number. And you can see that it's telling us our total assets would be 35 based on the stuff I put in. I didn't freeze my one formula down here. Okay. So that number, I probably should change the color or something, but total assets and then net income do it. So you can either use the 5-year CAGR rate, which is the average, or you could do like a trend line or something. Like you've got these years worth of changes. Like if you see a trend, like if something's steadily going up or whatever, it's a little bit more work. I'm going to say most people are probably just going to use that one rate, but you could theoretically take like an average or something of your other increases and use that. I don't care. I really don't. I put in there like I don't. It's your choice. Whichever method you choose, you'll need to do it for total assets, net sales, and you'll need to do it for the cash flow statement. So, and be consistent. Like if you're going to use the CAGR rate, use it for all of that. If you're going to use averages, use it for all of those, whatever the case may be. And the cash flows is just as easy as the other stuff. Again, you have to link it over here to that. Like you have to use something from there because we don't have the common size stuff. Then once you fill those pieces out, once you fill all those pieces out, you can come down and you could put the ratios in here to start with, but you could also green stuff. You could copy and paste them over, and it's going to tell you like then all of your formulas, all of your ratios will be updated based on our forecasted numbers. So you'll have your forecast up above, then you'll have forecasted what the ratios would come out to be. All right. And this is what I say, here's where you have to make a decision. Do those ratios make sense? Maybe they do. But if you're looking through, and now working capital is not one, but come down here, and I don't know if this would happen because obviously I haven't gathered all the detail for everyone's companies yet and like gone through and done it all. But say that for operating turnovers, so that's how many times it turns over in a year. So let's say it turns over 8.2, 8.4, 9, 8.0, and then you get over here and it's like something would, and again, these are linked to the numbers up above. So if one of the rate, if like you have a lot of consistency and then one of these things, any of these ratios is like off, like it just doesn't make sense, you can, and again, I'm giving you guys the option, don't have to. But if something really doesn't make sense to you, then maybe you want to look at why. Like, is it, this is the receivables, like what happened up above, like whenever we forecasted, what happened to our receivables number that made it like be all screwy. If we looked at our receivables number over here, like if you have a big negative or something, now if you're using the 5-year CAGR rate, you're not going to have that. But like if you had a big negative in one of these years for whatever reason, and you were using averages, then that's obviously going to drop your average a lot, which could mess up your forecasted stuff. Like there are reasons like that that you could be like, okay, this doesn't make sense. So what I'm doing is I'm giving you permission then to go and change the number here. Say the number should be, we think it should be 12. And the way you get 12 is because 12 makes your ratio. Maybe if I change it to 12 and now this is 7.6 or something, okay, that's a lot closer. So that I'm giving you guys the ability to go in and make manual changes just to make your stuff make more sense. Have to, but if something looks wildly off and you want to, then I would. Um, and then all I ask, and I put that in, is if you do go in and you manually override something, I put here, can you highlight? I want to highlight it in red, just so that like whenever I'm reviewing it, like I know, like, hey, you went in and changed that number to like work on the ratios or whatever. Um, and so we'll have our forecasted column of what we think is going to happen. Now, obviously, you can go out and you can pull the current year right now and you can compare those up front. We're going to do that in the next phase, so there's no point in doing it now. Like, like I don't care if your forecast is wildly off, like that stuff happens. Um, I mean, if you really need to go look at it so you can get as close, I mean, I don't care. But that's what we're going to do is we're going to do some variance analysis and we're going to go pull like the actual, like the final year of data and see like, okay, this was what we forecasted. This is what happened. Where do we have like big differences? Um, we're not necessarily going to know why, because we're not don't have internal stuff, but like we're going to do some comparisons that way. Which is why if you have something that you truly think is an outlier, it may make sense to go manually fix it. So, what do I want you guys to give me? Obviously, your Excel file. Now, whenever I say a one-page memo, it's just because we already have a memo format. I want you to tell me like which decisions you made, like which rate did you use, or did you use like a trend line or an average or something? I just want you to tell me like what did you pick? Like I've given you a few options. Which one did your group pick to use? Um, and then okay, which method did you use? Why did you pick that one? Because it's the easier of the two is a perfectly acceptable answer. Um, it could also be that you do it one way and your ratios and stuff don't make sense. And if you go back and you like use like trend lines or something or some other kind of averages, then maybe it changes those, and then all of a sudden maybe the ratios make more sense. So you go back and you change it, and then your logic would be, hey, I did it this way. A lot of stuff looked off, so I did it this other way, and everything looked better, so I went with the other way. I just want you to tell me so I don't have to guess. And then if you did you make any adjustments based on the rate, like if something was off and you had to go up and change anything. I just want to know what your thinking was. Why did you think it was off? Well, because it was half of what everything else was. Okay, that makes sense. But like, just tell me if you did make a change, why did you make it? Nothing long and drawn out. I said it can be a one page. It could be one paragraph, for that matter. Just so that I have them side by side, and I'm not having to guess what your group did. That easy. Um, And so those will be the two things that turn in the spreadsheet with the added sections and the forecasted column, and then the short memo. Honest to God, you've got since you have most of the numbers, you got to copy and paste your formulas. You do have to put together the things down at the bottom, but that's not a long, because again, I've spelled out the specific account you need. That shouldn't take long. And then, I would say collectively, everyone take a look at what the forecasted numbers are and decide, which method you want to use and if you want to change anything or whatnot. And we'll have our forecast so that we can compare it to actuals, and we can compare it to the other our competitors. um, in the next phase. So that's it. Um, that's all of it. I've got to get this stuff uploaded. I literally typed in this part D. That's the part I didn't have finished. I typed that during our break, so I'll get this published up to eCampus. I'll put it in. I'll put the new templates in. I'll just put them all on the same assignment so that you can go get whichever one you need. And yeah, it'll be ready to go. Any questions? I mean, it's I've tr I've tried to spell it out as much as I can, not just because I think you guys couldn't handle more, but like I also don't want you to like be banging your head off the desk. Like, what did he mean? Like, my goal isn't to make you frustrated with it. My goal is to have you go through and do the exercise so that you can then think about what you've done and you know sort of come up with that sort of logical reason of this is what we're doing and this looks good, that doesn't. Again, it's just a learning exercise at the end of the day. So all right, that's it. I'm going to stop the recording. I will post the recording once I've got to put it on YouTube, and then I will post the YouTube video also. Stop recording.